Just notice what sense you have of yourself in standing this morning. And if words come to mind that might describe your experience or not. It's a real process of learning to find words to articulate the nuances that you're beginning to discover. And it does develop. So just notice, shift your weight a little bit left and right so you actually bring a little movement into your standing. Notice how one leg supports you. And what you're drawn to when I say support. Is it the foot? Is it the sense of, maybe it's a sense of ease or disquiet? Maybe it's something about how you organize yourself over that leg. What you feel about the space around yourself as you do that. Or your breathing. How is it to breathe as you arrive on one leg and explore that sense of standing with your weight more on one leg, and then go a little in the other direction. So for most people, it will be different. When we get a dominant hand, we tend to get a dominant leg, although the dominance can change in different activities. So notice the contact of your foot with the floor and how you align yourself over that leg, over this side. And then go backwards and forwards, a little leftward, a little rightward, weight more onto the support of one leg, and then through the middle to your other leg. Just notice what's present for you and the sensations of standing, shifting your weight like this. And then walk around. Go for a walk. Some of us can be quite skilled at paying attention to different sensations or shifting our attention. And other people, it's useful to have their attention guided. So notice how your right foot contacts the floor. How your right leg comes to be your standing leg. Frees your left leg and your left leg swings forwards. So you might notice how each leg bends and moves forwards in space. And again, your sense of support over each leg. What do you feel in your hip joints? Are you aware of your pelvis moving in relationship to space as you walk? Or in perhaps relationship to your ribs? Or your spine? So you can think about the orientation of your pelvis. And then when you think of the orientation of your pelvis, where are you referencing that orientation from? Of your pelvis to where? Which part of your pelvis? And does that have any influence on the way your spine moves? The way your legs carry you and move through space? Then leave that. And keep following yourself, noticing as you walk back to your mat and lie down on your back. Did you notice how you got down to the floor? All those lessons that we've been doing about transitioning from the floor to standing or to sitting. Was there any part of your awareness that noticed the pathway you took? Okay, please lie on your back. Lie on your back with your legs long, if that's comfortable for you. If it's not, they can be bent. Just notice your contact with the floor this morning. Far two. Yeah, thank you. Listen to how your right leg makes contact with the floor. Your heel, your calf. The places that touch the floor give some weight, and the places also that don't touch the floor. Behind your right ankle, perhaps, depending on how your leg is oriented. Behind your knee. And maybe there's a little space further up the back of your thigh. Notice your sense of length of your right leg. From your heel to your hip joint. How clear is your image of your hip joint, right hip joint this morning? And then bring your attention to your left leg. Notice how your left heel contacts the floor. And the places along your left leg where you feel you can clearly identify that some of the weight of your leg, some part of your leg, makes contact with the floor. And then perhaps there's a little more detail that you could discern about that. The shape of the contact. The size of the area of your calf. And then also the spaces behind your ankle, behind your knee. And how does your left thigh relate to the floor? Does it make clear contact, or does it gradually shade? The pressure grade in a way that it's maybe a little more difficult to sense where the contact starts and where the contact ends. Notice how you perceive the length of your left leg from your heel to your hip joint, where your leg meets your pelvis. Let's notice, does one leg feel a little longer than the other, or a little shorter than the other? Does one leg have more volume, a sense of volume than the other? Or some other sense that you might have as a descriptor of comparing how you sensing one leg to the other. And sense how your pelvis makes contact with the floor on your right side and your left side. Feel like you lean a little more heavily on one side than the other? How would you recognize that? Could it have something to do with the shape of the pressure or the surface area that you can sense in contact with the floor. Do you have any sense that the weight of your pelvis is closer in the direction of your tailbone, your coccyx, or more towards your lower back, the rim of the pelvis, at the back, the large bones of either side of your pelvis? So from these relationships that we have with the floor, we can begin to find in that information a little bit about our orientation in this moment. Begin to wander with your attention upward along the length of your spine to your head, and then back down again. Noticing the shape of your spine in relationship to the floor. Where are the spaces? Where are the areas of more pressure, more contact that you can sense through your spine to the floor against your spine? And if you think about and sense how your pelvis is lying, for most people the spine begins to arch a little bit away from the floor at some point, and then returns to the floor again somewhere in the upper lumbar, the lower thoracic, or maybe even the mid-thoracic area for some. So how long is that arch? Can you sense where it leaves the floor and where it finds the floor? And imagine the space there. Do you have any sense of the space being a little different on the right side of your back and the left side of your back? Which might indicate that there's a larger arch or a longer arch on one side compared to the other. And where are the first ribs that you can sense if you travel upwards along your spine? Where are the first ribs coming away from the spine that you feel, oh, here, I know my ribs meet the floor, that's a clear contact? Or maybe not so clear, but perhaps you can identify that. And then bring one of your hands. So bring your right hand, just slide it palm down underneath your lower back there. And just give yourself feedback from your hand. Is what you imagined or sensed what you find with your hand? The length of the arch, the height of the arch. Well, for some, there may not be an arch. It may be more that the lower back is in contact with the floor. And then slide that hand out and put your other hand under the... Actually, firstly, before you put your other hand under, can you still feel a resonance of what you sensed with your hand? Has your hand helped you? Clarified your image a little bit? And then now bring your other hand underneath the other side of your lower back. And what information does your hand give you? About the shape of that space. Its length in the headward-footward direction, and its height, its curve. And take your hand, slide your hand out. And with your attention, travel upwards along your spine and sense, where does you feel the contact of your spine changing that indicates the curve of your upper back or the region of the vertebra of your neck? How long is that curve or that arch? Does it feel longer than the curve of your lower back that your lower back makes with the floor, or shorter? Is it higher, away from the floor, or lower? And then bring your hands there and find out what you sense with your hands. And when you're ready, bring your hands down and sense the length of your spine again, observing the image and how your image can be informed from listening to the contact that you make with the floor. And now, please bend your knees and stand your feet. And take a moment to notice, how has the relationship of your back changed? Or has it? And lengthen your legs again, and do that several times. Feeling to the same, do you feel the curves remain the same? Or do they change as you stand your legs or have your legs long? Does it make more difference to the relationship of your lower back with the floor or the curve of your neck? Maybe it changes one and not the other. Or maybe there's a little change in both. Next time your knees are bent, leave your feet standing. Interlace your fingers behind your head so that you feel the back of your head clearly resting in the palms of your hands. Then draw your elbows towards the ceiling so they kind of wrap around your face. And slowly, gently, with the help of your hands, lift your head a little bit away from the floor and then lower it again. Pause a moment and then explore lifting your head again, listening for whether the lifting of your head influences what part of your back contacts the floor. Does lifting your head with the help of your hands like this change the way your lower back relates to the floor? Or the way your pelvis lies? Or which ribs you feel leaning into the floor a little bit? Do you feel your abdominal muscles mobilizing a little bit? If you don't, so your knees are bent now and your feet are standing, if you don't feel your abdominal muscles, actually mobilize them a little bit. So see if you can connect the mobilization of your belly with the lifting of your head, and find out if that influences which part of your back and which vertebra lean into the floor. Does it change the way your pelvis lies on the floor? And how would you know that? Can you listen to discern whether the pressure on the back of your pelvis as you lift your head moves a little bit upwards, more towards the top of your pelvis, or does it move a little downwards in the direction of your coccyx, or not move at all, stays quiet, still. What's the expression of on your face as you're lifting your head? It's serious, smiling, you feel a little tension in your jaw. Or is it possible to let your teeth be a little part? So it's almost as if you're going to smile. If you feel like smiling, you can smile. If you don't, just let the corners of your mouth widen a little bit as you lift your head. And notice if that changes anything in either what you sense, how your organization changes, maybe in the comfort of the movement or the comfort of yourself as you move. And then leave that. Bring your arms out from under your head, down by your side. Lengthen your legs again if it's comfortable. And take a pause. And in that pause, just notice how the length of your spine is relating to the floor. And in particular, how your pelvis is lying. Where you feel the contact of your pelvis on the floor. Contact of the floor on your pelvis. And your lower back. Where your spine emerges from your sacrum, a little below the level of the top of your pelvis, and then moves upwards. What's the shape of your lower back like now? That little exploration change anything? Maybe it's just something in your awareness, or maybe it's something in your organization of the parts of yourself. So if you're comfortable to have your legs long, leave them long. If you feel any strain in your lower back, then bend your left leg and stand your left foot. But if you can, if it's comfortable, leave your legs long. And for you, Vishali, bend your left leg. Okay. Begin to gently, slowly roll your right leg in a way that you feel the pressure on the back of your heel moving a little more to the outside of your heel, and then come back. Observe if your foot needs to be active while you do this. So you could do it by turning your foot. Or you could do it by thinking of the length of your leg and that your whole leg is turning. So not just that the foot will turn in space, but it's the whole leg, the length of your leg that's turning. And as you do that, the pressure, your toes will point a little more to the right. You may notice that your right foot, the outside edge of your right foot, comes a little closer to the floor, to the right, and then let it go. Just do that many times. Noticing how you roll across the floor with your leg, whether you notice the change in pressure on your calf. Can you notice your breathing coming and going in the background? Notice if you wanted to go a little further, if you wanted to move the outside edge of your foot closer to the floor, what would happen in your knee, in your hip, through yourself? Each time, bring your leg back to rest. Pause a moment before you begin another movement. Do you notice a moment where you feel your knee wants to bend? If you don't notice that moment, bend your knee a little bit and observe the effect it has on the turning of your leg, the movement of your foot through space that's bringing the outside edge of your foot closer to the floor. And then let your knee unbend and bring your leg long again and back to rest. So as your knee begins to bend a little bit, you might have the sense that your leg is shortening a little bit on the floor. Okay, pause. And just notice, do you feel any difference after even those few movements between your right leg and your left leg? The right side of yourself and the left side of yourself. And begin to explore the same idea with your left leg. So beginning to turn or rotate your leg so that the toes of your left foot point more to the left and then return to your resting place. Can you allow your left knee to bend a little bit so it moves a little more to the side as your outside edge of your left foot finds the floor? And how is it? How do you experience yourself doing this action with your left leg compared to your right? You may begin to feel as you rotate your leg to the left, your outside edge of your foot gets closer to the floor and your knee begins to bend a little bit. That as your knee bends, your foot gets dragged a little bit on the floor. It slides a little bit. So it's not lifting your knee to the ceiling. It's letting your leg turn to the outside, softening the knee so it can bend a little bit more and open a little bit more sideways. Okay, rest a moment. Please bend your knees and stand your feet. Notice where you choose to place your feet, how you feel the contact of each foot with the floor. How much of the sole of your right foot do you feel on the floor? And compare that with the left. Does your left foot press the floor in different places than your right foot, or similar? Begin gently to open your left knee a little bit to the side. So it's actually not so much opening the knee, although it's opening the knee away from your other leg, but it's letting your left knee move sideways and then return back to the middle. Notice how that influences the contact of your left foot with the floor. And if you feel any echo of that movement in the contact of your pelvis or elsewhere through the length of your spine, gradually begin to make that movement a little larger and a little larger. So you might sense that the inside edge of your left foot begins to peel away from the floor as your knee moves further to the left. And you sense the opening in your hip joint, the lengthening of the inside of your thigh. As your knee moves sideways, do you feel any movement in your ankle, your left ankle, your left hip joint, your right hip joint? Or maybe the opening of your knee skips your ankle and goes straight to the peeling off of your foot from the floor. So make it a light, easy movement, but each time come back to rest with your feet standing, your knees to the ceiling, but gradually lowering your knee closer towards the floor, not with the intention of taking your knee to the floor, but letting your weight rest more and more on the outside edge of your foot. And sensing how you come back to bring your leg to stand again. And next time you lower your knee towards the side and you feel your weight resting on the outside edge of the foot, can you slide your foot on its outside edge a little bit away from you, away from your left buttock, in the direction of downwards, but not to straighten your leg, just to feel what it's like to move in that direction, and then come back. Slide your foot back and bring your knee back to vertical again so that your weight is balanced. The weight of your leg is balanced over a standing foot. Rest. Take a rest. So in the beginning of this week, we're looking at movements of rolling and coming from lying to sitting, and how our legs can organize themselves to follow the movements of the pelvis. And so often in the way we've used ourselves, the leg muscles, our musculature and our patterns of use are very strong, and it's difficult to disengage the legs, to feel that relationship, that connectivity, where the organization of the pelvis and the upper body, particularly the trajectory of the pelvis, influences the organization of the legs. And in this lesson, we're taking another approach of how can we make distinctions about how we use our legs and quietening the habits that might be present for us around our hips, buttocks, lower back, and in particular, our chest, our thorax. Please come back to the same position with both feet standing. And continue the same exploration with your left leg. Finding how that you lower your leg to the side and feel the weight shift onto the outside edge of the foot. And then beginning to allow your foot to slide downwards in the direction of lengthening your leg, but not going all the way to begin with. Finding out how you can come back, how you return to bring your leg back to the standing position. Once again to pause, and then just the left leg at the moment. We're still on the same leg unless you have a pain or a difficulty in your left leg or your left hip, somewhere else, then you can change it around. There's usually a rationale behind staying with one side. Can you keep your right knee upright as you do this? So you don't let the right knee tilt to the right. Feel the opening in your hip joint. As your knee moves toward the floor, the weight moves to the outside edge of your foot. And at a certain moment, you begin to slide your leg downwards in the direction of straightening it and then returning. Find ways to make this movement lighter, more comfortable for yourself. Can you sense the arc or the pathway of your knee through space? So at the moment, this lesson is about keeping your left leg upright, which is going to bring a certain constraint to your pelvis. Pardon? Right leg. Sorry, yes, right leg. Thank you. Right knee towards the ceiling. No, it's good. How much of the movement do you feel is in your hip joint and your leg, and how much is in your back and of your pelvis moving in relationship to the floor? What direction are you sliding your foot downwards in? Maybe you could explore that. So is it closer to the midline? Does that make it easier for your leg to slide downwards? Or is it more at an angle from the midline? Okay, please leave it and rest a moment. Lengthen your legs if that's comfortable, or leave them bent. If those of you who have lengthened your legs, notice as your legs are lying, do you feel any changes in the way your left leg is contacting the floor now? Or any difference between your left leg and your right leg? Or the way the left and right sides of your pelvis are relating to the floor? Or the left and right sides through the length of your back? Please bend your right leg again. Leave your left leg long. And this is, again, one of those lessons where if you are on a surface of a mat that has more friction, it can be more challenging to begin with to find the way to organize your leg to reduce that sense of resistance. But so you may want to try it, learning the movement on a surface that is less sticky. But there are advantages and disadvantages to both. Keep your right leg standing, your sole of your right foot on the floor, your knee towards the ceiling, and begin to roll your left leg. Rotate your left leg outwards so that your outside edge of the foot comes to the floor. Allow your knee to bend a little bit more, and gradually begin to bend your knee a little bit more so that your foot slides closer towards you on its outside edge, and then lengthen your leg again. So gradually, slowly, as it's comfortable for you to do, expand that movement. So your knee will bend a little more, your foot will come a little closer towards your buttock, but your knee is pointing out to the left. Maybe you'll notice a moment in the movement where you find your knee beginning to move in an arc away from the floor. As it gets easier to do, can you turn your leg in this way, slide your foot towards you, let your knee open and bend, and then find a moment where it would be uncomfortable or take more work if you wanted to keep pulling your foot towards you or bending your knee further, and bring your knee upright at that moment so that your sole of your foot comes to land on the floor. And then open your left knee to the side again. Feel the weight shift over the outside of your foot and lengthen your leg downwards. Are you remembering to play with the path that you choose to move as you go downwards? Maybe you notice a moment along the way where your leg could rest somehow, with your knee hanging out to the side or close to the floor, or you feel like you need to increase the work to straighten your leg. Listen to how you're doing the movement and find out if it's possible now to focus more on keeping the speed of the movement, of your movement, constant. So it doesn't get faster in one moment and slow down at another, but it stays the same throughout. Pay attention to what's happening in your left hip joint, the left side of your pelvis, your lower back, the left and right sides of your torso. Do you feel the shape of those spaces or the shape of your back changing as you explore this pathway of your leg turning, sliding, bending, and coming to stand, and then reversing the direction? Is there Does it influence the arch of your lower back in some way? There are moments when your lower back arches a bit more. And moments through your movement where it flattens a little bit more. Maybe the vertebrae of your lower back are quiet, relatively unaffected by the movement. Please lengthen your legs. Rest a moment. Notice if you observe any differences between your right leg and your left leg. Between the way your right side of your pelvis contacts the floor and the left side of your pelvis. Left side of your lower back and the right side. Your ribs, lower ribs, middle, upper ribs on your left side and right side. Your shoulder blades. Sense of length of one leg or the other, or one side of yourself and the other. Slowly roll your head a little in one direction, a little in the other. Is there any difference here that might be as a consequence of what you've been exploring? And pause. Please bend your knees and stand your feet again. Begin to explore moving your right knee sideways, leaving your left... Oh, before you do, just notice the contact of your feet with the floor. Whether you feel a difference in how the surface of your left foot in relationship to the floor and your right foot, or a sense of support, or the distribution of weight. And now begin to open your right knee sideways to the right, leaving your left knee and leg standing, and then come back. So just begin. Notice the very beginning sensations, the movement in your hip joint, how the weight changes on the sole of your right foot, whether you feel any shift in your pelvis and how it's relating to the floor, in your lower back. Each time return to have your right foot standing, your right knee vertical, and then continue. So many times, gradually, making the movement a little larger, feeling how you do it on this side. How you feel the weight moving onto the outside edge of your right foot as your right hip opens. The lengthening of the inside of your thigh. And then gradually begin to, when it's not comfortable to lower your knee to the side any further, your weight will be on the outside edge of your foot. Begin to slide the outside edge of your foot away from you, just a little bit. And then can you return? How are you breathing as you do this? gradually expanding your movement so your foot will slide further away, downwards. Observe the trajectory or the direction that you lengthen that this leg slides in. Next time your right leg is long, stay there. Observe the contact of your right leg with the floor. Begin to turn your right leg, rotate it outwards so that this outside edge of your foot comes closer to the floor, allowing your knee to bend a little bit, sliding your foot towards you and then back down again. Don't come all the way to standing yet. Let's explore how you're doing this. Could you do it at a quarter of the speed? Or if a quarter is challenging for you, half the speed? So that it takes twice as long to arrive at the same place. And twice as long to lengthen your leg again. Pay attention if changing your speed influences what you sense about how you're changing and reorganizing yourself to do this action. So it's not beginning fast and slowing down, or starting fast or starting slow and speeding up. The same speed. As much as you're able right now. Moshe talks often about wasting your time. And to those of us who have an attachment to achieving things and getting more things done, can seem like a contradiction. But it's about using the time wisely, of not having a sense of getting somewhere. And in that space, the possibility of noticing yourself in a different way or different things about yourself can emerge. So it's a precious waste of time that isn't, paradoxically, a waste of time at all. And whether a movement is easy for you or difficult for you, slowing down is one strategy for finding out what difference it makes. Whether it's possible to absorb yourself in the detail or the global influence of moving very small or at a very slow speed. Can you listen to what you're doing or what's happening in other parts of yourself? So now gradually begin to slide your foot upwards, and notice when's the moment where you can no longer travel easily, bringing your foot closer towards you, and at that moment, or somewhere in that zone, lift your knee towards the ceiling to bring the weight onto the sole of your foot. So continue with this movement, rest when you need to. Begin to observe other places in yourself, whether they're being influenced by this movement. Something's happening there. Whether you feel a subtle shift in weight across your back, or a change in your breathing, or movement in your ribs. What other places throughout yourself participate in this action of turning your leg outwards, allowing your knee to bend, sliding your foot on the outside edge towards yourself, drawing it towards yourself, and then finding that moment where you can lift your knee and bring your leg to stand. Does your left leg become involved in the movement at some moment? Do you press the floor with your left foot or not? And these questions are for you to find out. They have any meaning for you? Do they help you make a distinction or clarify something? They draw your attention to some part of yourself that you hadn't noticed. So how do you give your weight, the weight of your leg, to the floor, through the outside edge of your foot? And then continue giving reducing the amount of work in your leg so that the movement becomes easier, lighter, simpler, more comfortable. Rest a moment. Notice how you sense your legs, yourself, your relationship with the floor. Especially through the length of your spine, your pelvis. Please bend your legs again, stand your feet. Notice again the distance you have your feet from yourself, from your buttocks, the width that you have between your feet, the direction that your feet are pointing in relative to your lower leg. This time you're going to return to the same movement of opening your right knee to the side, beginning to lengthen your leg and bringing it back with the constraint or with the attention or the question, is it possible to do this without changing the relationship of your lower back to the floor to what it is now? So you open your right knee to the side. So first of all, tune in, listen to how your pelvis is lying, what image you have of your spine and the contact or the relationship of your lower back to the floor. And then begin to open your leg, right leg, a little to the side, finding out, is it possible to do this without changing the relationship of your lower back to the floor? Can you keep breathing while you do this? So it's not about holding everything still and stopping your breath, immobilizing everything. But in fact, you need to mobilize yourself quite differently to do this. Can your pelvis maintain its same relationship to the floor? That means not turning rightward or leftward or tilting so that the coccyx comes closer to the floor. So put your hands on the front of your pelvis. Feel those bony prominences, the anterior bones at the front of the pelvis. And begin to open your right leg to the side. Find out how could you organize yourself? So instead of perhaps feeling impossible, it begins to feel possible to open your leg without changing the curve of your lower back or the way your pelvis lies on the ground. What do you need to mobilize in your lower belly? Or what do you need to soften through your ribs and your chest that might help you? Try it with your left leg. So at first it may feel like you need to work or mobilize your belly, your abdomen, your abdominal muscles in a certain way. Maybe you want to try putting your right hand underneath your lower back. So instead of feeling the front of your pelvis, think of keeping your back of your hand in contact, or your spine in contact with the back of your hand. As you open your left knee to the side, feel the weight going onto the outside edge of the foot, beginning to lengthen your leg, and then drawing it back up again. Same speed. Maybe the trajectory will change. Maybe a different trajectory would make a difference. Lengthen your left leg, keep your right leg bent. And explore this pathway of rotating your leg outwards and beginning to draw it upwards. And see if it's any more possible for you to find that organization where the relationship of your pelvis and your lower back doesn't change in its relationship to the floor as you draw your leg upwards, turn it, rotate your leg, bend your knee to the side, and then finding that moment where your knee begins to move away from the floor. So that your leg comes to stand. So sometimes when we approach a movement in our organization, it's necessary from different directions. It gives us different information. It might be useful for one person and not so useful for another. But that's true of all variations in a lesson. So change your legs. Leave your left leg standing. Lengthen your right leg. Maybe put either a hand on the front of your pelvis or a hand under your lower back. Begin to rotate your right leg outwards so you feel the outside edge of your foot or your little toe coming close to the floor. Finding that moment when you can allow your knee to bend, or it bends spontaneously, or seemingly more spontaneously, and then sliding your foot towards you, finding the moment where your knee begins to move away from the floor, and where you can lift the weight of your leg and bring it upwards towards the ceiling so it comes to stand. Your leg comes to stand. And as much as possible, maintaining the organization and relationship of your pelvis and lower back to the floor. Notice what's happening through yourself as you do this. Through your ribs, the front, on either side of your sternum. Your ribs underneath your clavicles, on the left and the right side. The ribs that are lying on top of your shoulder blades, the back of you. And leave it. Lengthen your legs. Take a moment to sense your contact with the floor. Your right leg, your left leg. Your pelvis, the line of your spine along its length. And when you're ready, slowly roll yourself to one side. Take your time. Bring yourself from your side up to sitting. And when you're ready, organize yourself to come to standing. Stand a moment, sense yourself. Scan your standing, your sense of yourself in standing. Is there any difference from what you sensed in the beginning, before the lesson? How you feel your feet in contact with the floor, or support you sense from your legs, carriage of yourself? Shift your weight a little right and left when it interests you. And when you're ready, take yourself into walking. Before you go off on your break, take some time to walk around and listen to anything that might feel a little different that you notice to what you noticed before, or things that feel the same. Or same with a little difference.